Hi everybody. Today I'm going to give you a quick tour of the new Luxe Lens Firewood and Frost Action Collection for Adobe Photoshop. The collection contains 69 actions. There are 21 general workflow actions, there are 5 face and skin actions, 4 brushes, 7 vignettes, 18 bases, 10 filters, 5 snow actions, 6 grain actions, and 10 final sharpening actions. There's a lot to show inside this bundle, so I've selected 2 images that I think will give you a general idea of how you can utilize these tools and make your photography really stand out from a lot of typical images that you'll see photographers coming out with, especially around this time of year. The images I've selected have 2 very different subjects and depth, and I'm going to demonstrate for you how this action collection can best be applied to either. In the first, we have a fox a bit off in the distance, most likely shot with a telephoto lens, and quite a bit of background and foreground to play around with. The second image is a close-up portrait where the subject is filling the entire space, and we really get to play around with the skin tones and textures. So between the 2 images, you'll get a sense of how you can apply these actions to different depths, different textures, different subjects, whether it's portraiture or landscape. So let's go ahead and get started. For the first example, we have a very noble-looking fox in a field with some wilderness in the background and some flurries floating around. Our objective here is to observe what about this photo is working and what isn't. We want to improve upon its shortcomings and highlight its assets. I'll say right now that what I love about this picture is the composition. The fox is at a perfect center of the image, which means I'm probably going to want to use a vignette action to really emphasize that dynamic. Second, I love the depth of field, where the fox, the snow, and the grass at its feet are in perfect to near perfect focus, and the trees and the snowflakes fall out of focus with this kind of beautiful, almost surreal bokeh. So I'm going to want to emphasize that depth as well. What I don't like about this image is that even though we can acknowledge these extreme differences in color between these oranges and reds of the fox against the greens, grays, and whites of the environment, the fox is not popping out nearly as much as I'd like it to. Also, and perhaps most importantly, I want the beautiful winter environment to really meet its full potential and to become more of a winter wonderland. By the time we're done, I'm also going to want the color of the fox and the color of the environment to both complement and contrast one another. Instead of spending a couple hours in Photoshop trying to find the best way to do that, we're going to accomplish all of it with just a few clicks. So the first thing we'll do is we'll go up and click the Window tab, scroll down to Actions, and select. A window will pop up in the sidebar with all the Fire and Frost actions listed below. You'll find different categories of actions in this list for a variety of subject matter, ranging from general workflow to skin adjustments, if you're working on a portrait, for instance, to vignettes, brushes, and sharpening actions. And we're going to touch on all these today. So we're going to start by getting some of these color tones where we want them to be. So we're going to scroll down and find the soft pastel action, which is listed under winter color bases. Now watch this. All you do is you click on the action you'd like, press the play button at the bottom of the window, and just like that, we have a massive improvement in the image already with just a couple of clicks. And even more, we have a much better sense of where we could take this image to really meet its full potential. Now I would also like to show you this group of layers that make up the action itself. If you click on the group arrow, you'll see this list of adjustments that are being made for you. Any one of these adjustments can either be further adjusted or can be discarded with a single click. We're not going to adjust any of these because this action is working really great for this photo, but I wanted you to see the amount of post-production time this action has saved us, where lots of work that might have been done in Camera Raw or with various adjustment layers and brush effects has all been applied in a couple of seconds instead of spending anywhere from several minutes to even hours creating them. Now earlier I said that I really liked the depth of this image and that it was something that I'd like to really highlight for the viewer. So what we'll do is we'll find the depth contrast action listed under general workflow. Just like last time, we simply click, press play, and let it do the work for us. Now you'll see another really helpful feature here is the designers have left us a little message to guide us on how to customize the action to our image. In this case, they give us a couple of little tips on how we might adjust the action if we're working with skin tones and textures, opposed to maybe a landscape or a product photo, for instance. So we'll click OK on those for now. And you'll see that the filter is called Depth Contrast for a reason. It's given us increased definition and increased depth by removing some of the haziness from the original photo. Now again, I really like the composition of this photograph, so I'm going to highlight the fox in the center of the picture and simultaneously distinguish the warmth of the fox's fur from the chill of its surrounding environment. We're going to do this by applying the cool Vignette action found under the Vignette section. Again, we select, press play, and you'll see that one of the tips given here is to paint onto the mask if we want to increase the vignette effect. And it even guides you as to what kind of brush you will use, to what opacity, what size, in order to get a particular kind of effect. So we're going to follow their advice because I really want that fox to pop out. So I'm going to select the mask, select my brush tool, select my brush size, and I'm going to paint with black over the white mask where I would like to emphasize the subject. So now the cool blue of the vignette is mostly confined to the sides of the image and are not so much affecting the fox at the center of the picture, which is absolutely perfect. Now next we're going to use this really cool snow action that's going to totally immerse this fox into that truly beautiful winter wonderland that we wanted to achieve. I have to say that these snow actions are just absolutely fantastic. They're some of the best that I've seen, and every time I apply them, I'm always blown away by how good they end up looking. So we'll scroll down to Snow, select the Full Snow Soft action, and press play. Now there's a lot of information in this action, so we'll give it just a second to run, and there it is. Now if we open up the action group, you'll see these 3 layers of snow effects. What's amazing about this is each layer has a different representation of snowflakes. Some are large, some are small, some are blurry, and some are defined. Each layer we can either adjust or remove as we see fit, but I love this effect, so I'm going to leave it exactly as it is for most of the image, but I do still want to customize the effect to the environment. What I mean by that is you'll see at the bottom of the photograph we have these snowflakes standing out over the snow on the ground. Now I want that snow to fade out just a bit because 1, those snowflakes shouldn't be quite so visible over light colors, and 2, I want to give the impression that the snow falling at the bottom of the picture is actually hitting the ground. So what we'll do is select a soft eraser brush, set the flow to somewhere between 30 and 50, and just lightly brush over the lower parts of these layers until the snowflakes just kind of gradually fall into the ground. And voila! Now the last thing I want to do here is sharpen up the image a bit. First we'll go to the action window, we'll go to Final Sharpening, and we'll click one of the sharpening options that we have. You'll see that there are different options for different kinds of photos and different kinds of effects that you can play around with as much as you'd like. But for this photo, I'm going to click ProLab Sharpening Full and press play. Now the action is going to make a duplicate of all the layers that we've been working with, flatten it into a single image, and open it into a separate tab. This way we can work with the sharpening action non-destructively and preserve all of our original layers. The flattened duplicate will appear first in black and white, but the notification box will guide us back to color if we'd prefer. So we'll go ahead and get it back to color by following its instructions and close the notification box, click the tilde key, and hit the play button again. It will give us a couple of tips on how to best apply the sharpening action, which I'm going to skip through for the moment, but I do recommend that you follow their advice when you're doing this yourself. So to give you a sense of what the effect is here, I'm going to move the adjustment arrow to a couple of extremes so you can kind of see the range of effect this action is offering you. For this picture, I'm going to set the sharpening amount to 300% and the radius to 0.3, and I'm going to leave the threshold level where it is at 0, and I'm going to click OK. So now I'm actually going to drag this image over into the original tab and show you the dramatic difference between the image we started with and the dramatically improved result. Now for the next example, we're going to use a portrait. And we're starting off with a pretty solid photo here. The exposure is good, the composition is good, and we have some nice use of the rule of thirds and some really great detail to play around with. But what I don't like about it is that since the subject is taking up the entire frame, there isn't enough variation between the three primary colors being used here, which are the light browns and tans of the skin, hair, and the fur of the coat, the blue of the coat and the boy's eyes, and then the whites of the snow in the background. I especially don't like that even though this is a winter scene, I'm not convinced that this was taken in a cold environment. It almost looks like it was shot in a cozy little studio with some fake snow thrown on the jacket. So let's correct all that. So we'll go up to the Window tab, like before, click Actions, and then we'll scroll down to the Winter Color Bases section and select Pale Rose and press play. The image immediately becomes more dynamic, and we start to see some color tones being offered to us that we didn't have before, particularly this kind of rosy color in the skin that people will get in colder conditions. And the hair and fur are suddenly much richer and much more intriguing. Now this is a good base to start with, but the effect is a bit more than what we're really going for. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to slide the opacity down to about 45 or so, and let's see how that looks. And I like it. Next we're going to use two of the actions that we used for the previous photo to create some depth and also start getting a bit more blue into the shadows so we have a better sense of a kind of winter chill. So we'll start by going back to General Workflow and selecting our Depth Contrast action. Now it's going to warn us again that the effect is not necessarily something that we want over skin, and that is exactly correct. So we're going to go ahead and paint over the skin via the layer mask to remove this effect from the boy's face. Now we're going to go select the Cool Vignette action and apply it. Now we're starting to see these reds and blues really working well together to communicate that the skin is warm and the environment is cold, bringing a bit more drama to the picture. Now I really like where this is going and I want to take it a little bit further. So let's go ahead and apply the Warm Vignette action and we'll see what that does for us. And that's looking pretty good. But let's lighten the effect just a bit by bringing the opacity down to about 20, and then we'll remove the effect from the boy's face by painting over the mask. And now we're going to do something a little different that we didn't do for the last picture, and we're going to play around with some of the brushes for the skin. Now, if you're into portrait photography, you're really going to get a kick out of this. We're going to go to the Face and Skin section, and we're going to select Frequency Skin Tone Evening. Now we're going to get a few messages here guiding us on how to use the action, but I'm going to skip through all those and just show you how it's done. If you click on the group folder, you'll find three layers. The one at the top and the one at the bottom are making a balance between blur and sharpness. Now if you're familiar with frequency separation in Photoshop, it's a very similar process. The layer at the center titled Paint Here Only is where you'll be applying your brush strokes. So we're going to select that layer, we're going to pick up our brush tool, and we're going to turn the flow of the brush down quite a bit. Now one of the message boxes that popped up earlier recommends that you set the opacity of the brush to 100% and the flow all the way down to 3%, which sounds about right because a little goes a long way with this effect. But since this is a demonstration, I'm going to set the brush way higher to about 20%, just so you can see what the brush is doing. And then if I need to, I'll just turn the opacity of the layer down as soon as we're done. So we want to paint on this layer with the skin tones that we're trying to smooth out. So we'll grab the Eyedropper tool, we'll sample some skin tones, and then we'll just start painting. And as I'm doing this, even with a 20% brush flow, it might not immediately be obvious that changes are being made. But when we toggle the layer on and off, you can see that the change is actually quite dramatic. Now, a couple of quick pointers when using brushes on faces. You will generally want to avoid the mouth, the eyes, and the nostrils. The reason is that even though it might not be immediately apparent, you're going to lose a lot of definition of these facial features, and the face will begin looking a bit washed out, which is generally something that we want to avoid. So once you're done painting over the face, it's good to go back with a soft erase brush and just go over some of the more defined features to make sure that we aren't losing any of those definitions. Now this is actually looking quite nice, and I think I'll just leave it there. So let's go back into our brushes and try out a couple more options. Let's select the Quick Skin Smoother and click play. You'll see that the layer mask is black, so that means that we'll want to paint with white in the areas we'd like to affect. Now, I'll go ahead and paint over most of the face here, and you'll see the skin becoming increasingly smooth, but we're also going to start losing some of the features in the process. In this particular example, I really don't want to lose the definition of the boy's freckles because they bring so much to this portrait. So I'll switch back from painting in white to painting in black and kind of retrieve some of the definition that we just lost. You'll also notice that the boy's lips appear to be a little chapped. So I'm going to go ahead and correct that a bit by painting the effect just lightly over the lips. As with the frequency skin toner, we also want to make sure that we aren't losing any definition in the nostrils, the eyes, or any of the lines around the mouth. There are two more brushes I'd also like to show you really quick, keeping in mind that some of the basic rules we've just established when applying localized effects are also going to apply here. So the first brush that we're going to use is the eye whitening brush. You'll notice that the eyes have a little bit of red color that's definitely something that we're going to want to correct. So we'll play the action, and painting with white onto the mask, we'll carefully go over these areas. Now when it comes to the whites of the eyes, you'll want to be very, very careful not to overdo the effect because it will become very unrealistic very quickly. So what we'll do is we'll adjust the opacity until we have the look that we're kind of going for. Next, I'm going to go back to General Workflow and select the Dodge and Burn action and brighten up the boy's face just a little bit. Now, for anyone who hasn't used Dodge or Burn tools in Photoshop before, take my advice and use them. They are one of the most powerful tools for post-production portraiture and a photographer's best friend. Now that said, as with whitening the eyes, it is very easy to get carried away. So make sure that you adjust the opacity to keep it looking realistic. So we'll go ahead and we'll select the Dodge layer and we'll paint with white over the areas we'd like to highlight and really make this face kind of pop. When I'm done painting, I'm going to turn the opacity down to probably somewhere between 15 and 20%. And let's see how that looks. Looking great. For a final touch, I'm going to select the Iris Booster and press play. Now, being very careful not to paint into the whites of the eyes or the eyelids, we're going to boost this blue color just a little bit, which will not only make the eyes more captivating, but it will also make the subject more cohesive by matching the eyes to the coat. So now I'm going to select all these adjustments that we've made, and I'm going to put them in a group and toggle back and forth between the image that we started out with and the image that we're going to walk away with. So that's it, folks. I strongly recommend checking out all the additional actions and brushes in this new bundle, Firewood and Frost, and really make your photography stand out from the pack. I hope you enjoyed. Everybody take care. Bye now.